previous interviews, you've talked about open primaries and how they can be one way to reduce polarization. Do you think, though, that maybe it's just the two-party system has reached a point where it's not healthy or productive anymore? Do you think having more than two political parties would reduce the polarization? Would that do anything, or that's not addressing the heart of the problem, in your opinion?
It's a tough question to answer, and a lot of people way
Yeah.
smarter than me have theorized on this. You could look at the Democratic and the Republican parties today and say it's not really two parties because there's such big factions within each
Mm-hmm.
one. Within the Republican Party, there's a MAGA faction, there's the Freedom Party caucus, and there's different constituencies. And you look at the Democratic side, and you look at the Progressive caucus, and then you look at different factions, and you're like, okay, so that's in a way it's more splintered than
Yeah.
uniform within it.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's time to close ranks, they do. So in that sense, they can be
Right.
mobilized. Then I think about when I look in my local elections, how many times do you see a Constitution Party or Libertarian Party or Green Party candidate? They're not always there, right? Sometimes it's you'll see a DNR and then who the heck are these other people, right? So these third party candidates are not really competitive in these races where they could be because typically the third party strategy is they are grass tops. They're going to parachute in some dynamic person onto a national campaign and say, I'm running for president and I'm a famous person and I'm going to get a lot of media attention and I'm going to run for office at a presidential level. And there's not a lot of ground support for them, right? Because the parties at a local level are basically non-existent, right? They're not on the ballot in many states. So really it's tough for them to get traction because in their communities, there's not a lot of support. There's not a lot of community support for these third parties. But at a national level, they can occasionally be a charismatic enough figure like a Ross Perot or Jill Steiner or Ralph Nader to where you can get 3, 4, 5, or even double-digit percentage, Bobby Kennedy Jr., right, to
Right.
get significant attention. And is it healthy for democracy to have more perspectives? In my opinion, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, we need that. We need the diversity of opinion in order to keep things strong and vibrant.
If Jill Stein was there, she would say Democrats and Republicans spend a lot of money keeping, Green Party candidates off the ballots. Like this is at least nationally they're doing this in states. They're both sides are spending a lot of money, a lot of resources legally to keep Jill Stein off the ballots in states. Like this is actively happening. They did the same thing with Robert F. Kennedy as well. Um, you are right though, I think in terms of if third party if third parties can figure out a way to mobilize voters on a grassroots level,
Yeah.
that then it's a completely different picture.
Yeah.
Because then truly you can have more than just the duopoly that we have between Democrats and Republicans. I do think it'll help because right now it's either you're on this side or the other. It's black and white. But when there's different colors, right, like purple, orange, I don't know if the identity part of it becomes so focal because there's so many options.
Well, you look in the state of your point is well taken. I mean, you look in the state of California, the number one party in terms of registrants is the Democrat Party. Number
Right.
two is decline to state, right? So the
Really?
no party preference, and increasingly for Gen Z, increasingly identify with no party affiliation.
Yeah.
So they don't feel connected to the party. They tend to vote one way or the other. They tend to vote either as Republicans or as Democrats, but they don't identify with the parties in these ways. So you can argue that the parties are kind of out of touch in that sense. In, Gen Z increasingly leans liberal towards the Democratic Party. There are certain issues that are top of the list important for them. Economy crosses all generations, but for Gen Z, number 2 and 3, climate change, gun violence, those are hugely important topics. If you look at other generations, those are not the top 2 and 3 topics. They barely make it in the top 10,
Yeah.
right? So for young people's voice to really be amplified, you're like, hey guys, vote, show up, turn out, because no one's going to focus on those issues unless you do.